Everybody, Dr. Rob Silverman here. I have CEO and founder, good friend of mine, Mr. Michael Antonelli from Healthgevity. Michael, thank you for taking time out of your day to come join us.
The pleasure is all mine. It's great to be back with your community. We're going to have a ton of fun. I know we have a lot of topics to get over today, so let's do it.
Oh, yeah, well, let's dig in. You've got a company called Healthgevity, and, it's without question blazing a forerunning trail in that you talk about longevity, you talk about peptides, you talk about functional medicine. Where'd you get this idea, and how were you able to mesh all those ideas into one cognitive point?
Well, for the last 20 years, I've been aligning and collaborating with frontline experts like you who really tell me what's working and what's falling short within your protocols. So, coming out of COVID, a lot of the practitioners that I've been working with over the last 20 years urging me to do something, raise the bar, disrupt what's happening, identify and bring to market technology from all over the world that's bridging these unique bioactives, oral peptides, all into one collaborative synergy so we can really address the root dysfunction present with so many of your patients.
I'm excited to really get into some of the formulas. Normally, I don't talk about formulas on the podcast, but your formulas are so cutting edge. Your formulas, you use a quercetin, a curcumin that are highly bioavailable. So I'm really want to delve into that and, get a little granular. But let's really start off with the idea of longevity. It is without question the conversation of now. It's been that conversation for the last 2 years. When you break up longevity, you talk about lifespan, how long you live, health span, how long you're healthy. Why don't you give me your view and how healthgevity fits into longevity?
Absolutely. Well, I think, if we were recording this a decade ago, we would be talking about lifespan. That was a big buzzword, was how long we can live for. You'll see a lot of the longevity research being conducted during that time frame, spearheaded by researchers like David Sinclair, was all about how do we live the longest. And what we saw coming out of COVID was a shift about health span optimization. So it wasn't the road to live to 125 anymore. It was decisions and opportunities that we have day in and day out that impact our health span. So our quality of life, our now, and over time, we'll see a profound change and impact in our quality of life. So for those listening, if your goal is to listen to 125, well, we're going to talk about some incredible takeaways. But if you're like me and you just want to live the best life, the most robust and healthy life, then we're going to also deliver some cutting edge clinical pearls today. Because I always say there's this image I like to use in my presentations, right? You have that 100-year-old that's in a wheelchair with no
Mm.
memory, limited function, or you have that 100-year-old, 90-year-old running, active, lifting weights, right? So it's what path do you want to be on?
Without question, it's interesting you talk about health span, lifespan. I think what you're trying to encompass is vitality. And I know I've had a lot of off podcast conversations daily, to be perfectly frank, and that's because I'm always relying on you for some new, up to date information. That said, you don't not necessarily want to add years to your life. You want to add life to your years. And I really like your position. So let's start with the biggest thing, metabolic health. It's such a critical issue today. How can peptides, bioactive proteins help optimize insulin sensitivity, glucose levels, and energy balance?
Yeah. And there are some incredible peptides and unique bioactives that we were really impressed with when we were reviewing the literature, because when we looked at about 8 to 9 out of every 10 patients are metabolically unhealthy. This is a huge area, and it's not always so obvious, right? If you're listening and let's say, well, you're not getting routine blood tests, you don't have a continuous glucose monitor, that doesn't mean that you're not part of this 8 out of 9 people, right? So we think about the role of ghrelin and leptin and cholecystokinin and
Mm.
hormones and this connection with satiety. So we think about many of us that have tried to do these diets and failed. Hunger is a major component.
Yes.
And there is a unique peptide through fermentation, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is trademarked in publications as DNF10. And this is a novel peptide because over time, what it's doing is modulating hunger cues and signals. And this is a peptide that we tapped into to be the base to overcome many of those obstacles. So it's helping the body more efficiently dispose of excess glucose. How do we support healthy insulin levels? How do we modulate those hunger cues? And then looking deeper than that is, how do we beige that tricky, sticky white fat? The role of healthy ketone levels,
Great.
the role that the mitochondria have. This is all happening, and peptides are there to really move the needle in an efficient and safe mechanism. And so that's one of the peptides we've talked about before that I think is a good place to start for those that are trying to tackle and improve that area of their health.
DNF10, satiety peptide complex, reduces the physiological hunger cues. I think that's a great place to start because the idea is if you're hungry, you're not eating nutrient-rich food. You may have leaky gut. You may have something wrong with your vagus nerve. In addition to that, to speak to the idea of metabolic health, 93.2% of the American population is metabolically unhealthy. So that means if you have a conversation with 25 people, two of them are metabolically healthy. That is without question insane. And when you talk about a peptide, I'm not trying to divert, but what do we mean by a peptide for those listeners? And how does a peptide work?
So peptides are strings of amino acids, usually 2 to 40 amino acids, and then larger will be a protein. And so these peptides, and historically peptides could either be injected, it could be done orally, topically, even strips now. And depending on what the peptide is, not all peptides can be done orally, and many peptides do need to be injected. So what we're doing with our researchers and collaboratives are identifying the peptides that can be done orally. And these are there to be modulators of proper signaling pathways in the body, but also very safe. So it's there, I like to say, the analogy of the power lines in our neighborhood. And you might have a neighbor say, "Hey, did you just lose power?" But it didn't affect you, right? So we have power outages that can affect a single home, a block, a town, a community. And the peptides are in there to fix signaling um, locally, regionally, and then in bigger networks. And so, with this particular area, when we're tackling metabolic health, we're talking about ghrelin and leptin and neuropeptide Y and cholecystokinin and actoponin levels and adiponectin levels. I mean, so this peptide, and there's thousands of peptides, right? So we're really identifying the targeted peptide for a specific action that we are needing in the body. So in this case, it's hunger cues. And it's not a magic bullet, right? This isn't a peptide that's going to shut the lights off on dose one. But over time, and this is what the research showed. So one of the studies I saw that really impressed me at the 500 milligram dose is by week 8 with over 120 participants, the average person on this peptide was consuming around 600 less calories per day. And so when we think about that area, right, if all of us listening could just do a better job making better decisions with food intake, a lot of the other stuff that we're doing is going to be that more effective. So, a great place to start with the metabolic dysfunction that's present with so many of us.
Without question. I want to echo what you said. People make bad choices. They're searching for something to light up the reward center of their brain, i.e., that overuse of ultra processed food. Most Americans do eat too many calories, but they eat way too many calories that are nutrient deprived. You talk about metabolic health. You also spearhead that formula with something called berberine, which is a very famous herb, but you use a specific kind of berberine that has higher absorption. I'd like you to take the mantle and run with it from there.
There's no shortage of publications confirming the utilization and clinical success of berberine. But what happens on a provider level, I've been hearing this for a long time, to get the doses that mimic the studies to move the needle, there's a patient population that have GI distress from standard berberine extracts. So some of our ingredient partners that do advanced ingredient technology have found a way to identify what's called dihydroberberine. And in the body, not to get too technical, standard berberine in the gut converts to dihydroberberine. By eliminating that phase and those steps and relying on the gut to do that by delivering pure dihydroberberine, we're seeing 5 times better absorption and double the half-life. So what does that mean? We don't need those high levels, the high
Great.
doses to get the therapeutic outcome. And now it frees up space within the capsule to bring in additional therapeutic supportive casts to complement the goal of what we're seeking. And so dihydroberberine, if it's the first time you're hearing about it,
Mhm.
it is one of the new kids on the block. So 200 milligrams is that sweet spot, and especially in collaboration with satiety peptides, in this case, a really effective 1-2 punch to help tackle things like glucose and insulin issues.
You really speak to the idea of utilizing peptides with herbs. So that's one of the reasons that I believe that your formulas are so cutting edge. A new type of herb, so you can use less of a dose. So any side effects, if there were to be any with the usage of berberine, would be mitigated. And more so than that, you're talking about blood sugar, hunger, which really segues into my next topic about cardiovascular disease, because the number one killer in America, believe it or not, is cardiovascular disease. 51% of Americans die from cardiovascular disease. Much to the chagrin of many cardiologists, it's really not cholesterol that is the igniter. There's a word that you may want to use for a formula at some point. It is without question blood sugar regulation, and insulin regulation. That said, what innovations are you working on that support cardiovascular health, from endothelial function to mitochondrial resilience?
You hit it right there. The leading cause of death today is still heart disease. And so it's an area that we had to take very serious and analyze what some of the leading nutritional dispensaries are offering on a provider level and what the new research is showing. But it's a bigger approach, similar to the Ignite formula that we just hit on. The cardiometabolic connection is really addressing some big buckets: elevation of lipids, hypertension. You talked about the endothelial
Yeah.
glycocalyx. That's one of the most emerging areas in clinical research right now. The capillary, the outline, what
Could
we're
you go
looking
over
at.
that? I don't mean to
Yes,
interrupt you. Could you? Because that's a topic that no one's discussed and is without question at the top of my consciousness. So go
of
for it, my
course.
friend.
Yeah, so the glycocalyx is the lining of our vessels. So
Hmm.
it's a slippery, slimy substance that make up and outline our whole microvascular system.
Yep.
And it
Great
can be
stuff.
quickly degraded. So glucose dysfunction, alcohol, toxins in the environment. But the good news is that as quickly as it can degrade, we can repair and regenerate. So
Hmm.
what I like to refer to the glycocalyx is the bodyguard or the security network outlining our whole vascular network.
Great
And we think
example.
about capillaries, blood vessels, right? This is a huge area and within our body. And leaky vessel, right? I know you've been talking about leaky gut for a long time, but your listeners are going to start being very familiar with what we call leaky vessels, and that is the degradation of the glycocalyx. So, in our view, in order for a cardiovascular formula to be relevant in 2025 and beyond, you need to be addressing glycocalyx health. We already talked about elevation of lipids and hypertension. We also want to talk about nitric oxide and circulation and fibrinogen levels. And another emerging area is vascular aging and NAD decline. And there is a formula that we've been working on for the last couple years that is tackling all of these areas. We call it Cardio NAD to help talk about all of these correlations. But you let me know where you want to go within this or other topics. I'm happy to dive deeper.
I love the idea of leaky vessel, leaky gut, leaky blood-brain barrier, leaky vessel, which really speaks to the idea of specific things that are supposed to be carried that are getting through into the bloodstream and stimulating an immune response, which ultimately stimulates inflammation. And that is the backbone. If you have uncontrolled inflammation, that's where you have all these deleterious effects. And it's funny that you talk about specific vessel issues. There was a study that just came out that at 50 and over, and I'm there, and you're way far away from it. God bless you. Is where your vessels start to really stiffen. They start to become leaky. So I think in the cardio NAD, I think the specific nutrients become very important. And I think maybe if you could detail them a little bit for our listeners, that would be a great starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, it's all about compliance and convenience. So we wanted to replace multiple bottles that people were having to open up every single day to tackle this major area. So we'll start with the role of the NAD, which is NAD3 and niacinamide. And NAD3, you might have read about this in Tony Robbins' book and Mark Hyman's book. It is a very unique compound now with 3 human studies that is playing offense and defense within the cell. So it's addressing the root cause of NAD decline and depletion while helping the body restore healthy, youthful levels. And so it's all about the salvage pathway and supporting the CD38 and the whole cascade of helping the body produce levels of NAD to mimic like we were in our prime. So that's the first component. Then we get into the weeds. Okay, well, lipid and circulation, things like bergamot at a healthy dose of
Mm,
500 milligrams, right? Because it's not just about ingredient selection, it's making sure that the dosing is matching what the studies are being performed at. And so there's no window dressing here, there's no proprietary blends. It's truth in labeling, so you can actually backtrack why we made that selection and how we got to the dose. So 500 milligrams of bergamot is in here. Another big area, CoQ10. And to
right.
overcome some of the absorption limitations that CoQ10 have, this is CoQ10 bound with collagen peptides. And these peptides will help create a absorption matrix in the blood to help the CoQ10 levels be utilized as a fat soluble vitamin. 300 milligrams are being delivered on the CoQ10 side, which is what a lot of our medical advisory board urged us to be at. And so that's there. Then we start talking about nitric oxide, both acute and chronic restoration of nitric oxide. So there's an ingredient matrix called FitNox, which is pomegranate, moringa, and black
Mhm.
ginger, with multiple human studies to confirm its utilization and absorption. Then from there, we talk about the glycocalyx. And one of the most easiest ways to restore and regenerate and repair damage to the glycocalyx is looking into the seaweed families for rich high polysaccharide content. In this case, we're looking at the macabu extract, which is a rich source of fucoidins. So fucoidin is being delivered a very nice area, a dose of 250 milligrams, and that is there to be used for daily repair of the endothelial glycocalyx. Then peptides, right? How do we not talk about peptides? These are lentil-derived peptides called peptipump. That's for ACE inhibiting blood flow and circulation, which is really, really important to also help deliver some of those other bioactives we just spoke about to make sure they get to where they're needed and intended to be used. Last but not least, nanokinase. So when we think about spike
It's hot.
protein and fibrinogen, you get a nice
Mm.
dose of nanokinase to round out this formula.
Nattokinase is hot. It's interesting that you talk about all these different ingredients. Just for clarity, a spoiler alert, Michael believes that these are all supplemental to lifestyle being exercise, good nutrition, and possibly some other needed supplements, vitamin D, omega-3, pre and probiotics. So we're not saying this takes the place of anything. It enhances your outcomes. Now, we were talking about plaquing, we're talking about inability to deal with inflammation in the heart. Well, since the body's all interconnected, obviously we're going to talk about the brain, which if the number one killer of death is cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's is the sixth leading cause of death. I can tell you as a practitioner, people are more concerned, maybe understandably, of Alzheimer's than cardiovascular disease. There are some great peptides that have a very health promoting effect on the brain. Could you share that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And not all peptides, right? We're going to start with some peptides, but there's some really unique emerging bioactives to tackle our brain to make sure we're keeping it and maintaining it in its prime. We're going to start with dihexa. That's another emerging peptide that can be done orally. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. The secret sauce here, it's all about promoting neuroplasticity and the synaptic connections. Acute and chronic, we also see it can help with learning and memory and focus and cognitive function, all the big buckets. It also helps with circulation of the brain. We've had a couple of people talk about they feel that this is helping even with tinnitus. And so it's an area that when you go to the peptide conferences, the faculty, the ones teaching, this is going to be a peptide that gets a lot of play in action. From there, another peptide and helping with managing and modulating cortisol is going to be something called Pepti Sleep. These are brown rice derived peptides that's going to help quiet the brain and the mind to get you to sleep, but also research is showing it lengthens every phase of sleep. So as you know, our deep sleep's where we're doing a lot of the repair. It's where our body's recovering. But so many of us are not sleeping enough. So definitely check out Pepti Sleep, which is in our Sleepgevity. Uh, and then outside of the peptide area, getting to brain health, right? So we look at dihexa, another emerging ingredient, ergothioneine is really
Yeah.
talking about the role of the mitochondrial and brain aging. And a real recent publication talks about ergothioneine, especially when you get to the levels that we're dosing at 25 milligrams. It promotes and supports neuronal senescence. And that's the healthy turnover within the brain and making sure that the body's recycling and not accumulating these zombie cells in the brain. So ergothioneine is going to be one that you're going to hear for a lot of different longevity buckets, but it's up and coming in the role for brain health. Another newcomer is going to be salithroside. Salithroside is occurring naturally in rhodiola in about 1%. And over the last year, rhodiola has now been added to the endangered species list. So, through our novel ingredient innovation partners, through natural fermentation, we're able to megadose salithroside, which is responsible for a lot of the more adaptogenic properties of rhodiola, especially in the brain and our body ability to handle stress. So salithroside is going to be a newcomer. We're using it, but as of today, we're the only practitioner brand using it. And then from there, I think saffron's another ingredient to put on your radar. There's a lot of unique data from sleep to even mood balancing, but saffron is, I think, one that's getting a lot of play and here to stay. So I wanted to put that on the listeners' radar. Also sticking to that in the GABA agonist family is dihydrohinokiol, DHHB for short,
Mhm.
where it crosses the blood-brain barrier and really think about it as like a natural chill pill. Really helps you 20 minutes or less feel calm. And you do that without the loss of motor function that some of the more prescription options that are available have the tendency of doing. So dihydrohinokiol, again, I'm just kind of giving you some of where we're seeing the trends emerge in the publications. And then a big area here, I don't know if you want to, we're still talking about the brain, but fatigue, inability to focus, motivation. This could be a good time to even talk about paraxanthine if you want.
We got a lot to unbox there. You did a great job in detail. Um, just so you know what you were speaking about, and let's go back to the idea of Alzheimer's. If it's mild to moderate Alzheimer's, you can stop and reverse it. Dale Bredesen's work, Recode, has done it. Dean Ornish has published articles on that. So that's number one. Number two, sleep. Great idea. I mean, patients complain, do you have a sleep formula? What can you do for sleep? Sleep is your time where your brain, tying sleep and brain, come in, and this brain goes to a sponge and squeezes to about 40% of its size, squeezing all its metabolic waste. I think I want to date ergothioneine. So I know you may be a little quiet on the theme, but everybody asks me about methylene blue. So I will give Rob's opinion on methylene blue. Number one, it does help with mitochondrial function, but it didn't make the list on your formula. It doesn't make the list on any of my formulas that I would use in my office. If you're going to ask me about methylene blue, you have to ask me 5 times first about ergothioneine without question for mitochondrial function. So now that we put that all together, I think that we should talk about the paraxanthine because I believe it is critical into overall outcomes.
It's so important because we look at the research and how many people listening right now are either not waking up refreshed or crashing in the afternoon. They just feel like their mind's not firing the way it used to. And what are so many of us turning to? Usually caffeine driven options. But what does the research show? That far too many of us are either slow or fast caffeine metabolizers
Mm.
and or have genetic issues. And we were so grateful for some of our clinical partners here who invested a lot on a lab side and clinical studies to identify the breakdown of metabolites that caffeine converts into. And what they uncovered is that the majority of caffeine downstream will convert into what's called paraxanthine. And what they found was if we can isolate out paraxanthine and just deliver this as a pure ingredient, well, what happens? And what we see is that you get all the benefits, all the good side of caffeine while still calling it caffeine free, but you don't have to worry about the jitters, potential anxiety, the tolerance buildup, or
Mm.
even the crash. So you're still even getting the caloric burning properties of caffeine. You're still getting the neurological and neurotransmitter benefits, but you're bundling all the benefits for 3 to 3.5 hours. And this has been what we feel is one of the unfair advantages within our portfolio because it's one that works on the first dose. It truly elevates your brain to fire on all cylinders without this feel like you're on something, right? So you have this elevation in performance and then gentle, it just wears off and you can repeat it if you want. But this has been a big game changer to
Mhm.
help so many of us. It's a great place to start, right? I know we're already touching on so many areas, but this is an affordable option that you can include, feel right away. And maybe that's the difference between waking up, sitting on your couch versus waking up and going for a walk or going to the gym or lifting weights, really just putting the protocol into motion. But paraxanthine is another ingredient that's here to stay, and there's a ton of research ongoing and or just recently published that you should definitely check out if you haven't yet already.
Paraxanthine, to reiterate, gives you all the benefits of caffeine without all the side effects. And being a consumer, and my wife always reaching for it in the morning because she's always reaching for coffee because don't talk to my wife before she gets her caffeine. It is just a bad day. A lot of people who consume coffee, you have to run to the bathroom. You spoke about them, fast metabolizers. You don't get that with the paraxanthine. So, speaking about the idea of brain health and cognition, and using Alzheimer's as our staple. Alzheimer's is a dysfunction in the immune system. So, as you know, I'm a big proponent of immune system conversation because I think inflammation adversely signals the immune system and immune health. I wrote a book, Immune Reboot. Are there peptides to support a healthy immune system?
Now you're talking my language. Absolutely. There's several. And this is where it really gets intriguing when we talk about immune resilience and immune modulation and just helping rewire some of the dysfunction that accumulates over time. So we can start with things like the thymic peptides, right? Thymosin beta 4, thymosin alpha 1, and even the thymosin fragments, right? The TB4 fragments are the ones we've really dug into cleaving off the first four amino acids of TB4, where we see that be the workhorse and provide a lot of therapeutic outcomes. And what's great about the thymic peptides is again its ability to be modulators, so not forcing the issue, which in some autoimmune issues you want to avoid, but there to be stabilizing some of the dysfunction. And so thymosin beta 4, and then even in the bioregulator world, thymogen, which really gained popularity overseas in Russia when it was a prescription for its ability to be that immune modulative issue. And we've stacked it with the thymic peptides, the TB4 frag, to make this really nice dual peptide matrix on a cellular level to help restore some of that dysfunction. And so whether it's the reoccurring illness and sickness, right? If you're listening, you get sick, you get better, and it's this continual roller coaster. This could be, peptides you can consider tapping into to help restore some of that balance in the immune system. You'll
Really love the idea of balance because that's what it is. So you've got three lines of defense. Number one is your gut microbiome, your digestive system, which we're going to just put a little pin in and wait 5 minutes and get to because we have to have a lengthy discussion on that. The other one is the balance and what we're talking about between the innate and the adaptive immune system. The innate immune system is what you're born with. The adaptive is what you acquire over a period of time, antibodies, B and T cells. So which one of these peptides affects the balance, or better yet, if we could share which one of these peptides work within each unique part of the immune system?
Yeah, well, I think the beauty is not only the safety, but the ability to have impactful support in all of these areas that you outlined. So we talk about the TB4,
Hmm.
we talked about thymogen, and really looking at it, in my view, to help recruit the T helper cells
Right.
and the Th1, Th2 balancing. Then we look at a peptide we haven't talked about yet, KPV, and that also
Mm.
will help restore the cytokine balance and meaningful for mast cell dysfunction. That could also be looked at. Then we have this whole other area of proteins or biofunctional proteins or even peptides, things like lactoferrin or even biofunctional colostrum that would be also meaningful to help restore uh, damage to the immune system. And really, it cues up this whole gut immune system crosstalk to then look at another popular peptide like BPC 157 as another option here. And we talk about immune support.
Oh boy, here it comes. BPC 157. Everybody's talking about it. So before we delve into that, I just want to share. I know I'm going to get a lot of questions. So here you go. I've got an affiliate code with Michael. It's called Dr. Rob S. It's a one-time order. You can receive 15% off if you listen to the podcast. So that'll be in the show notes. Getting back to BPC 157 and gut health. Ooh, ooh. Gut has become a central focus in your portfolio without question. Understandably, the gut is the epicenter of your health. It's where your macro and micronutrients are absorbed. 80% of your immune cells are in your gut. But more than that, here's the lining of your gut, imaginary lining. On the inside of the gut, we spend all this time worrying about anti-inflammation. We're worried about heal and seal the gut lining, and we should. But we totally forget about the other side of the gut where the bloodstream work, which really affects adversely our immune system. So what I've liked what you've done is you've packaged some formulas and taking some insight into not only healing the gut, but healing the gut in reference to the immune system on the other side of the gateway.
Absolutely. I know some of your listeners were probably like, how long is it going to take till they talk about this peptide? And I think we did pretty good. We hit on a lot of other useful
Yeah, I
information.
mean, we were holding it out. We brought Wonder Woman out. It's there.
But as you're listening and perking up, all roads usually lead to BPC 157 to be talked about in great length because it's so meaningful in a variety of protocols. And it's a go-to for so many of our top practitioners because it sets the tone and it has this domino effect. So you hit it, right? Gut repair, it all starts in the gut. But this is a peptide that works systemically. And so you're going to see not only gut healing, but on a muscle skeletal level, an advantage of the repair and regeneration properties. And this will also connect with the immune system. So if you're listening and you have the aches and pains, or you're on a PPI, or you're trying to stay on the field longer, and maintain that edge, right? This is going to be a peptide that we can massage the messaging for all these and more. One of our favorite formulas, and for a very obvious reason. But in your view, I guess to ask you a question, just to
Sure,
change
let's go. I
the
love it.
deck, but where do you see this peptide make the biggest difference in how you're using it clinically? Because that can kind of set the tone of where we go and talk about it.
It's interesting. I believe that it's the Wolverine supplement because, as the character Hugh Jackman portrays so favorably, as he gets shot, he heals before your eyes. It's a quick heal. And when we talk about a quick heal, we're talking about a quick heal in the gut and musculoskeletal life. Interestingly enough, I like to call it the Swiss Army knife because it has so many different positive health promoting features. Uh, I actually made a list because, as everybody knows, if you're any kind of action hero, Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, Frank Grillo, they are taking BPC 157 because it's great for tissue and injury repair. It accelerates healing. It enhances cell and regeneration. It promotes recovery from surgery, digestion and gut health. It protects and repairs the intestinal lining. And everybody knows I'm a gut guy. It supports gut health. It reduces inflammation. It helps with chronic pain. It may also have some neuroprotective effects, which really speak volumes to the idea of brain health, promotes nerve regeneration. And you know what? It's got a great safety profile. So everybody says, let's talk about human studies. Guys, there are some human studies. There's not a plethora of them, but there's something called the window of opportunity. I always say the window of opportunity is the surfboard. Well, where do you want to catch the wave? Well, the best ride is catch it at the beginning because once the wave comes and drops down, you got nothing but sand. And I believe that the crescent is coming with BPC 157. How'd I do?
Amazing. And I knew you would. I queued you up. I think the big
You
takeaway
did.
here.
I dunked it finally. The point guard got the score. I love it. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's all about systemic resilience. And that's what this peptide's delivering. And all those things that you just outlined for the listeners, we've seen clinically confirm. And that's the beauty of serving practitioners all over the country and many countries actually. This has been a peptide that we've seen translate what we saw in animal models or what we saw in theory. And the N of one here is so powerful. And so I'm glad we kind of waited to dive into this because I think this is people are listening. Where do I start?
Well,
This potentially could be it.
let's talk about we'll call it, or I called it the Wolverine peptide. Let's talk about some Wolverine stacks. So my Wolverine stack, and help me with this, would be BPC 157, KPV, and TB4 frag. And let's not forget PEA. So I just queued you up. Everybody's going to go, what in God's name is PEA? Is it the green stuff? Is it when they go to the bathroom? What do we got here?
Yeah, no, PEA is in the endocannabinoid family, over 600 publications. It's referred to as a lipid resolving mediator. And
Mm.
so when we were in our formulation journey, these peptides at microgram dosing play such a small component of the landscape and real estate within a capsule. And so we were looking at functional fillers that also have dual purpose. And what better way to complement the actions of BPC 157 than a lipid resolving mediator like PEA? So we're using 500 milligrams per capsule of a micronized PEA, and our body's naturally producing this compound in response to elevations of pain and inflammation, both in the gut and all over the body systemically. And so there's no shortage of data on the human side of this ingredient, especially how we're dosing it. This is the ingredient that most likely you're going to feel before the peptide component, but together, an absolute game changer. And so when you were talking about the Wolverine stack, and to kind of repeat that, it's the BPC KPV PEA combination stacked with the thymic peptides. So you got the TB4 frag with thymogen, and that's what's really creating an environment on a cellular level to create sustained change. And I think that's what's so important for those listening that want Dr. Rob's Wolverine protocol.
So to reiterate, BPC 157, Swiss Army knife, KPV, really more of a gut promoting peptide with immune system. TB4, what would you say?
That's going to bring tissue repair and immune repair on that component.
So would it be fair to say with the PEA, we're talking about calling the firemen and putting out the inflammation, and the BPC and all the others coming in and being the contractors and the construction guys and rebuilding the body?
Absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of formulas fall short because you have these regenerative ingredients that are there to repair, but really hard and challenging to repair the house when it's still on fire. And so this dual matrix approach is helping control the fire, as an analogy, while putting the body on a cellular level in a better position to repair and regenerate and thrive on its own.
And fire and healing and everything really speaks to the chiropractor or the people that are talking about musculoskeletal injuries. Which one of these translates into musculoskeletal healing? Because 8 out of 10 Americans have some form of lower back pain. And one of the biggest complaints going to the medical doctor is rotator cuff, lower back, headaches, just basically musculoskeletal damage.
Yeah, agreed. And I think one of the nice starting points of how you integrated this into your practice was really supporting that patient that you're seeing every day. And especially with how long you've been integrating nutritional supplements to come now with the peptides and either layering into someone that's been a long-term supplement user and seeing this elevate this long-term protocol and see the difference, and also into a novice or a newcomer to supplements and seeing even short-term what this peptide complex is able to do in the healing journey for that patient.
So it gets into the musculoskeletal regeneration, musculoskeletal healing. So my chiropractic PT brethren may want to consider this. We've got a good friend of ours who remain nameless. He's been on the fence so long, I think he's got a splinter in his buttocks, but it's going to happen. I can tell you that. So one of the things that we didn't talk about is how muscle mass, as it's been called by Gabriella Lyons, is the organ of longevity and how important muscle mass is. I've referred to it as the currency of longevity. And also, believe it or not, one of the bigger tests I want to throw out there is fat-free muscle index. So how much fat-free muscle do you have really determines can you raise the level. So the patients who have a decent fat-free muscle index but still have a way to go, I've used creatine derivatives, but your formula doesn't have just creatine, and I want to be specific. It has creatine monohydrate, which has the bulk, 90 to 95% of the data. Nobody's saying creatine HCl doesn't work, but the data for muscle protein synthesis is without question weighted heavily in the corner for creatine monohydrate. Creatine has been around so long, I wrote it as a thesis in chiropractic school 27 years ago. So I'm going to detail it for you, and then I want you to do the color commentary for me. So the play-by-play is what creatine does. It's great. It allows ADP to go to ATP, gives you energy. Creatine is also fabulous for muscle protein synthesis, but more so than that, really seeing a great cognitive boost, more in women than men. Then when you mix creatine with taurine, I love taurine because taurine closes the synaptic cleft and allows the decrease in excitotoxicities. And I think, as you would say, the secret sauce, taurine allows for bile acid promotion, bile acids. If you have decrease in bile acids, you have an increase in leaky gut, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it's a pleiotropic type of amino acid. You have glycine, which is a great add. Lysine, which is a critical element. If you're eating plant-based protein, you need lysine to make it as effective as animal protein. And you have glutamine, which is the most abundant amino acid in the body. You put these all together, I'm seeing a tremendous improvement in muscle mass, longevity organ, and fat-free muscle index scores. It's
Yeah,
all yours, baby. The mic is
you hit it.
open.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, creatine monohydrate is still, as you spoke about, been the most published form of creatine, but even talk about long-term safety studies, there's nothing coming close to that. So that's the foundation of the formula, the 5 grams, the 2 grams of taurine, 2.5 grams of glutamine, and then the powered by peptides. What does that mean? So Prime Strength is going to feature dual peptides. In this case, you're going to have PeptiStrong, which now has 3 human clinical trials published to confirm it's 2.4 grams of what it's delivering. And that's supporting fast and slow twitch muscle fibers, all about activating muscle protein synthesis, but also confirming double the strength, double the power, and double the efficient of recovery. And
Great.
these peptides derived from fava beans, AI discovered, has been a total game changer. Even in the last clinical study, we showed in 56 days an almost 1% increase in bone density. So this peptide, when you layer in those other ingredients you spoke about, is a game changer. The other newcomer of the peptide world is shortened as DL185
Mm,
or dileucine. It's the dipeptide form of leucine. This overcomes some of the issues of high dose leucine for absorption issues, but bundling all the benefits. Dileucine, and there's a lot of studies underway and have just also been recently published, has outperformed leucine head to head for activating muscle protein synthesis, strength, and recovery. And so that is in here. That all makes up what we call prime strength, an unflavored, no sweetener, no flavor powder. And then for those that love capsules, we have the Pepti Strong paired with Pepti Pump, and that's the lentil-derived ACE-inhibiting peptides to allow blood flow in the muscle. And we've paired that with ginsenosides RG1 for senescent cell burden within the muscle, and ginsenoside RB1 for the gut muscle connection. But we've taken muscle health very serious as an organization. We know it's one of the biggest predictor and biomarkers of how well or how poor you're aging. And without skeletal muscle, what do we have? So you hit it right here. These are so foundational when we think about age-related muscle loss or immune-related muscle decline, prescription-related muscle potential issues, to your weekend warrior, to your seasoned athlete. It's all about maintaining and achieving that edge. And either of these formulas are certainly designed to give you that.
So the Pepti Strong, which I forgot, I apologize. You called it the hydrolyzed fava bean. My understanding is it's much more effective for muscle protein synthesis. I think you'll know the number than whey protein.
Yeah, it outperformed whey protein 4-1 in the original study. And they also looked at hospitalized bedbound patients. So patients that forget about going to the gym, couldn't even walk, and think about the muscle wasting that's occurring, and saw that this peptide provided support to keep the muscle that was there and minimize the decay and decline. So it is definitely one of those peptides that should be on your radar. We've been talking about it for several years now, and just even super excited to have the dileucine finally available and
Mm.
available for utilization.
Yeah, I think I said lysine and it was leucine. I apologize. Um, let's talk about how we want to consume it because with creatine, you don't want to eat it in a hot aqueous solution. So it's not like collagen where you can dump in your coffee. You want to avoid it with caffeine. And the other question that I'm going to ask you is what about, the old shake, with the little blender stuff? Can you shake it up or does it have to be straight?
No, yeah, it's really designed to enhance any other beverage carrying the flavor. So we've given you this neutral addition to upgrade your beverage. So for those listening, if you're already consuming a protein shake, this is absolutely going to enhance and supercharge it. If you're already consuming the fruit and veggie powder or a smoothie or an electrolyte powder, or if you're still utilizing fruit juice or any beverage, uh, iced coffee, all these things, you can throw this scoop in there and elevate and enhance its impact.
So everybody in mind, he listens to every one of my podcasts as we come to the close. And he says, you know what, Rob? I need one thing to do differently on Monday. Michael, what would you suggest the one thing he should do?
That is a big question. If you want me to pick one thing, it's to incorporate something like paraxanthine. I think a lot of us, similar to sleep, we live with either not sleeping well or being fatigued for so long it becomes the new norm. So to give you one actionable impact that's going to work quickly and elevate you on so many levels, we deliver paraxanthine in what we call brain boost. That would be where I would start to set the tone, put our bodies in a better position for sustained change, and then circle back with us and we'll tell you where to go from there.
Sounds great. And I have one question BPC 157, the question that's always asked. What are the doctors saying about it? Because everybody's taking it and people want to know and they want to know if they can trust it. I wholeheartedly trust it. It is the go-to peptide as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I think where a lot of that trust question is coming into is how many of these random fly-by-night companies now are selling research-only peptides or not for human consumption, but yet they're investing in Instagram and Facebook and TikTok ads.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's really aligning with the right practitioner and the right companies that are getting vetted and are doing third-party testing both as a raw material and a finished formula. So we take the guesswork out of what might be in that capsule. And so it's not to say we're the only ones doing it, but I would certainly say we've been vetted and trusted by thousands of practitioners. It's a good place to start. But I think that's where that trust question is coming into,
Mm.
and hopefully some of these pointers are a good place to help you ask the right questions to make sure that you are putting what you want in your body and it's not something else.
So let me ask you if you could look into the crystal ball as we close and you with your healthgevity eyes, what would you say you're going to see in the next 1 to 3 years in reference to longevity, peptides, etc.?
I think you're going to see a lot more clinically validated with human studies, peptides, biofunctional proteins, binding proteins. These are all areas that research is undergoing right now. Whether it's AI-derived peptides or natural fermentation or utilizing things like CRISPR, this area is just heating up, and there's a lot more to come. And part of our commitment to you is to make sure that we're aligning with the right companies investing in this research and innovation all over the world to make sure that we are keeping our fingers on the pulse to make sure that our pipeline is accurately representing the emerging research.
So we're on the precipice of an explosion.
That's right. And we're at the right place, right time, right community.
And you are the right guy. And I'm happy you're on my team. I'm happy I know you for the last 20 years. It's been great to see where you've come from to where you are now. My man, you've done a great job. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge bombs with everybody. Look forward to seeing you soon. Mike Antonelli, Healthgevity, Dr. Rob Selvman, Proven Health Alternatives.